Well, did they know it was a rough cut? Well, we'll fix it in post. We'll fix that in post. Well, we can fix that in post too. Look, don't underestimate post-production magic, Chip.
Stay tuned for tonight's adventure with the Fat Man.
Okay, here we go. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whatever time of day it is. I hope it's good to be where you are because I'm really excited to be here today. My name is Baltimore Fats, and this is Artemis Foul. No! Of course, I couldn't nail it today. This story just keeps getting better, guys. Have fun. All right, so we're headed back to the party, but I'd like to set a better stage now that we have an understanding of what's going on and some of the players involved. So it's 1870-ish, about 5 or 6 years removed from the theater that we call the Civil War today, and the Reconstruction of the South and the reconstruction of the narrative itself has begun, figuratively and literally, with the help of men like George Peabody, right, who sells millions of dollars of junk Maryland bonds, of which the B&O Railroad is the main beneficiary of, for infrastructure. Right? And I think it's interesting that the B&O Railroad logo here doesn't even have a train on it. I mean, how is that? That is crazy. To me, all this represents is capital. Johns Hopkins is still alive, and he's finalizing and hatching his plans and ideas for what his hospital and university will be. And as far as the university is concerned, they call it the first research university in America, which makes me wonder what the heck the other universities that had been around for about 100 years or so by this point had been doing all this time, right? If they weren't doing any research at all. And we can't forget about Alta Rome and all the things that were happening on Cathedral Hill with the Basilica and the Unitarians and the Presbyterians and the Episcopalians. Where are they down here? Right, we got the YMCA right here as well in the coming years. This is 1851. But there's a lot happening in this area, and not to mention Mount Vernon just a little north. But things in Baltimore are going according to plan, right? Because fat cats like these were getting fatter, right, on their plans to take over people's minds and their bodies, right? And that's not even, and let's not forget about the Carrolls and the Howards and some of the other connected families we've been talking about. Right, these fat cats, all these guys, they're getting ready to press play on their medicine and culture and fake history program that they intend to use to brainwash the new populations of people they're expecting to show up. The program written by the Peabody Institute and tested and perfected in places like the Maryland Club and the Maryland Institute, among other venues in the city. Whether it's the immigrants of the mainstream narrative or the purposefully bred populations of Baltimore, there's about to be hundreds of thousands of people processed through Baltimore alone in the coming decades. Right? It's a good thing they got all that infrastructure money to prepare for this influx, right? Things are going so well, in fact, that it's time to start laundering that money through charitable and social causes, right? And what better way to kick off that scheme than with a big old launch party come fundraiser for yourselves, right? And why not start with a preview of performances of some of your programs, like the tableau parties and Mrs. Jarley's Waxworks? And we know that the Penningtons were there and what some of their roles were. But as mentioned before, this party starts with the ladies, right? Mrs. William Reed and Mrs. Frank Elder recruit the good Professor Rabelais. So Mrs. Frank Elder is still a mystery to me. But if her name, in fact, turns out to be Catherine or some variation thereof, I think I'm going to soil myself, right? Because it's just how plugged into this story I feel right now, right? And so I do learn a bit more about Mrs. William Reed, and we're going to get to her in a little bit. But there's another lady that's a part of this group here, this coven maybe, I don't know, that Amy Darcy Wetmore talks about as being a part of the next tableau. And her name is Mrs. Charles Carroll, right? Because of course it is. Right? Her maiden name was Sally White. And does that last name sound familiar to you, Mary? Right? But the next tableau, the tableau that she plays a part of, following the tableaus of Apollo and Diana killing children and Romans raping women, right? Amy Darcy Wetmore continues, right, that another group was the Temple of Ephesus. This ruin was beautifully copied and supported by female figures known as caryatides. One of them was Miss Sally White, afterwards Mrs. Charles Carroll, who died 2 years ago, so I guess in 1906, same year as the Jubilee. and so now if she was a part of this, I needed to find out, what the Temple of Ephesus was. And here it is in a scale model. It's one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world, and it was twice the size of the Parthenon. And it was a temple dedicated to none other than Artemis. Not this Artemis, right? That the Romans knew as Diana, that is murdering children along with her brother Apollo as part of the first tableau, right? Niobe's bane, right? And not to mention, it's also the name of NASA's next moon mission, right? We are going forward to the moon to stay. Good luck with that, right? It's unbelievable. So now I have not one, but 2 tableaus in tribute to Diana, right? The slaughter of the children, right? And her temple. But not only that, there's at least one more Diana at this party. At the end of the party, it says, the statues were last. There was shown a collection of statues. Diana was taken by Harper Pennington. Wait a minute. Harper Pennington? RG's mom? Billy the Kid's wife? She's playing the part of Diana too? And let's not forget, she has Carol in her blood as well. And so we have a Carol actually playing the role of Diana, right? And then we have the new Carol, Miss Sally Carol, playing the role as a caryatide. And so what caryatides were these columns that were carved out in the shapes of women or goddesses, I'm assuming, of the temples. All right? And so she was dressed as Diana as part of a caryatide representing the temple. Presumably the Temple of Ephesus had these on it, but the model doesn't support this, and the ruins, what's left of the ruins, doesn't support this either. And so let's see what Google Earth has to show us about the ruins of the Temple of Ephesus, the Temple of Artemis. All right, so we have the Temple of Ephesus up here in our search bar. We'll click on it. We're coming up in on it, and it's in Turkey. And here it is. All right, the Temple of Artemis. Getting in on it further. It's just so stunning to me how this stuff just doesn't even look like a picture, right? This is clearly a digitally rendered image, just planted on here until you get down to the ground, right? So let's bring our guy down to this column here and see if there's a caryatide on it. Nope. I mean, this is all that they show for this ancient wonder of the world, one of the 7 ancient wonders of the world. All right? I mean, you could make this anything you want with a good story. Oh, there's another mini column there, but no caryatide. So what did the people who threw this tableau or waxworks party know about the Temple of Ephesus that isn't shown in its ruins? And so I think I found the answer to that. So I found this article about the temple, which I'll try to remember to link, right? It says that such was the legendary splendor of the Temple of Artemis that it was the very first ancient site that the 19th century Common Era Western archaeologist deliberately went looking for. And now I can't remember if this was among that list of ancient sites and now I can't remember if this was among the sites listed when I went looking for ancient sites in the Neolithically Delicious episode, but I can't believe it says that it was the first one they went looking for, right? The modern antiquarian, the first of the archaeologists, right? And it says that it was found in 1869. Common Era by John Turtle Wood, which is interesting euphemistically there. I don't know. And excavations began under the auspices of the British Museum in London, and they discovered several important artifacts. Is that how you spell artifacts? Such as fine marble figures of Artemis Ephesia, dating to the 1st and 2nd century Common Era. So even well after they tell us the temple was originally constructed. All right, but apparently there were statues at the very least, if not these caryatides, at the temple. So they want us to believe. And certainly word of this got back to Baltimore if Mrs. Charles Carroll is dressing as a caryatide, or perhaps maybe there was actually some living memory of these caryatides happening. Who knows? I don't know. And so now I have no fewer than 3 representations of Artemis at this thing, and at least 2 of them involve the Carrolls or the Penningtons. They seem to love themselves some Diana, right? And so with this much attention being paid to Diana, I started to wonder if this could be one of those ritual reenactment situations, right? And so I checked out if there were any festivals that honored Artemis or Diana. You know that there was, right? And it was called Nemeralia. And the Nemeralia, which was also known as the Festival of Torches, was a 3-day high summer affair that took place on the Ides of August, the 13th through the 15th. And now, does every month, is the 13th through the 15th the Ides of every month? I thought for some reason it was kind of special to March. So this Ides of August festival was held in honor of Diana, right? And so the Nemeralia has a pagan tradition that predates Rome, right? It's an ancient practice in Italy, in a region known as the Lazio. Look at that Laz there, D. Right? And the celebration took place on the shores of Lake Nemi, right? Which was known as Diana's Mirror back in the day, right? Maybe still is by some. And back then, she was known as Diana Nemerensis, hence Nemeralia. So I don't know if this region, this Lazio region, looks familiar to you at all, but it should, because that's where Rome is, right? Rome is actually in an area with Laz as its prefix. I mean, that's really unbelievable. I didn't see that coming. What a coincidence. And so the Nemeralia was originally a tribute to this proto-Artemis Diana, who was also known as Potnia Theron to the Greeks, right? Who all of these Artemises and Dianas and Potnias were. They were the lady or queen of the animals. And as goddesses of the animals, she was also goddess of the hunt and nature. Right? And the first depiction of her is, wouldn't you know it, it's the seated woman of Çatalhöyük, right? Big Mama. And Mama's hungry. Mama's always hungry. None of this could be happening by accident, right? And so by having their Nemeralia in the high summer as a festival in honor of the nature goddess, it's kind of like a pre-harvest festival where the ability to hunt and harvest was celebrated. No hunting was allowed. And these nature queens of the animals, Diana, Artemis, Big Mama here, they're often depicted with dogs, as this depiction of Artemis is here, right? And dogs were venerated because of their role in the hunt, which is interesting because of what this first century CE poet Stalius wrote of the festival, right? And he writes that it is the season when the most scorching region of the heavens takes over the land, and the keen dog star Sirius, so often struck by Hyperion's sun, burns the gasping fields. I think that's really interesting because I wonder, obviously they want it to be read as a metaphor, that when Sirius is low in the sky, that means there's like drought or something, I don't know. But I have to wonder if there could be a more literal meaning, especially with those, legends and myths of Saturn being so close and the stars being much closer than what they appear to be today, and how that could have affected things. So I think that's kind of curious. But of course, none of this does me any good being a summer festival when this tableau party is happening in the winter. It is the winter of 1870. So no outright observable connection to Nemeralia here, but there is definitely some form of Diana worship or idolatry going on at this performance. And it wouldn't surprise me if she shows up again, right? Because there are other Greek and Roman tableaus that I just haven't investigated yet, right? And so leaving no good Roman festival unreformed, right? The Catholic Church turns this into a feast day for none other than the Virgin Mary. It's the Assumption of the Blessed Virgin Mary, celebrating God's miracle of scooping Mary up to heaven, body and soul. Right? And I didn't know this before, but there's also a legend out there that the Virgin Mary is immortal, right? And so could possibly still be walking this realm today. I think that's really an amazing idea and something that I may have to play with. and so what makes this even more amazing, of course, is that the cathedral, right? The basilica on top of the hill, right? It's called the Basilica of the National Shrine of the Assumption of the Blessed Virgin Mary, America's first cathedral, right? So are you trying to tell me that the basilica is really a secret temple to Diana? Diana and Artemis, for that matter, were both virgin goddesses. And believe it or not, they're sometimes called the goddesses of the lesbians because of their chastity and their disdain of men and their close relationships with their all-female companions. Right? And so now does this mean that the Virgin Mary is an immortal lesbian? I don't know. Right? But all of this Diana worship is starting to make a lot more sense. Right? Goddess of the hunt and nature, and the whole area of the cathedral and Mount Vernon being a part of Howard's Woods. You just can't make this stuff up. And so now that we're up to speed on Artemis, let's get back to the woman playing her in the Temple of Ephesus. Sally Carroll, daughter of William L. White of Somerset County, who marries the good doctor, as I said, in 1870. And so if this happens after the show, that would put it in the winter months of 1870, January, February, March, and not so much maybe November, December. And so unfortunately, her husband, Dr. Carroll, has a touch of the Pennington effect, right? Because the gatekeepers offer up very little information on him, on Dr. Carroll, for this story played by great B-movie character actor Charles Cypher. All right, the gatekeepers don't offer me much. Where he went to medical school, which I believe was the University of Maryland, without having to make a slide for it. Where he went to medical school, and there is a brief obituary about how he died of a heart attack and stuff, but as a relatively young man, he was like 60 or something. There was really almost nothing there on him, right? But on his dad, on Sally's father-in-law, the senior Charles Carroll here, Charles R. Carroll, right? He's a very interesting cat, right? Because he's the first treasurer and vice president of where? Of the Maryland Club, not that super exclusive men's only club, right? That specializes in propagating culture and the arts alongside its partner, the Peabody Institute, not that club, right? But not only that, he is also the treasurer for Old St. Paul's Protestant Episcopal Church. This is absolutely incredible considering how freaking Catholic his family is. All right, his great uncle or something was probably John Carroll, the first Archbishop of Baltimore. Right? And all the Carrolls are Catholic. You know, Charles Carroll of Carrollton, the signer of the Declaration, was Catholic. The only Catholic signer of the Declaration. How is it that he's watching over St. Paul's money? St. Paul's, which is the centerpiece of the Church of England in Maryland, if not in the whole country, based on its proximity to the Basilica. Right? How is it that being so staunchly Catholic, that his family is so staunchly Catholic? And like I said, I think this is probably his great uncle or something, you know? How is it that he's collecting money for the Protestant church in Baltimore, just blocks away from the Basilica, right? And it starts to make a little more sense when you find out that this Charles Carroll, and therefore his son as well, the husband of Sally, they go back to the marrow-sucking barrister. So he's the bigwig of their branch of the Carroll family, right? And he's the builder of the mansion on the hill, Mount Clair in Carroll Park, home of the greatest brick-making mud the world has ever seen, and where the B&O Railroad lays its first track, right? And Baltimore has this as the meeting house, where the theater of the Revolutionary War was truly orchestrated. And I say this, of course, because the barrister is very chummy with good King George, right? King of the British Empire at this time, at the time of the whole Revolutionary War process, really. Right? And after, right? They were so chummy, in fact, that this is the dress that the barrister's wife wore to Georgie's wedding. Nope, nothing suspect about that relationship at all, right? And so the good Dr. Carroll, regardless of what I could find out about him, I'm sure would have been a very prominent Baltimore citizen without having been a doctor. And his bride, she turns out to be a bit of a player herself as a member of the Daughters of the American Revolution, whose party I crashed on my second visit to Mount Clair. They were very interested in me and my cane and my questions, but I had a very lovely visit with them. But it's possible that they're a major cog in the wheel of shaping this false American Revolution narrative. And I hope to explore that further down the line. Right? And so this has been Sally's story, right? And so it's because of her that I decided to redouble my efforts and see if I could find out anything about the ladies, right? Mrs. William Reed. And as I mentioned, there's nothing yet on Mrs. Frank Elder for me. But these ladies are clearly a major part of these shenanigans, right? And with all this goddess worship going on, right? They would have to be, right? And what does it say about Sally Carroll and Harper Pennington that the goddess they're playing is a disdainful virgin lesbian? Yeah, I don't know, but it has to say something. And so having struck out with the gatekeepers on these two ladies, I decided to go back and read the earlier stories that Amy Darcy Wetmore has written about the entertainments of the bygone era, right? Routs and masquerades and charity ball days, how fashionable Baltimore amused itself during the years after the war. And it's here where the story starts to get really crazy, right? And it's where we'll pick it up in the next party crashing episode. Remember, guys, just because you don't know the truth doesn't mean you can't have fun with the lies. Until the next one, cheers.